Lenny's one of my favourite guys, just one of the finest all-round musicians and human beings of the 20th century. He was a fantastic pianist, one of the world's greatest conductors, an incredible pedagogue, and a wonderful composer, with a very kind of unique style, and he loved to play jazz a lot of the time. And this piece, Trouble in Tahiti, which he actually incorporated later into his final opera, Quiet Place. It's the story, a day in the life of a 1950s couple, and I mean, he was, that was his contemporary period. It was written in the 50s, and we start right in that world with all of the kind of artificial, almost over-caffeinated, technicolor world of those commercials, the housewife and the bread-winning husband. Seems quite dated to us now, but it applies firmly to any part of suburbia, is really what he's talking about. And he uses all of the kind of musical influences, not just kind of the strict formal influences that he was so good with from just being a very well-educated musician, but all of that jazz and blues as well. So we start with a nice big blues lick. And then we're off, so firmly in the world of blues and jazz. And we have this trio, which looks like a backup band to some, 1950s torch singer, and they're all perfect choreography, perfect smiles, artificial faces, everything at the same time. All of these wonderful syncopated rhythms, these jazzy kind of little swing in the drum kit. He's just perfect at embodying everything that was going on in this world in the 1950s. It's just takes us right back 50 years ago to this time. However, the story is such that this perfect marriage that we're seeing in this picket fence house with this couple isn't perhaps going so well behind the scenes. This marriage is falling apart. And actually the piece is quite tragically sad. The story of this relationship disintegrating is really crushing in the end. But it has such kind of cynicism and humour and brightness as it looks at it through all of this technicolor world. It's joyous. Yeah, that seems like a bit of a leap, doesn't it? Across, I don't know, what is that? It's a good 300 years, more than 300 years, 350 years of musical history. But they've got more in common than you might think, Lenny and Claudio. They're very jazzy guys. Monteverdi's a very bluesy guy. There's a lot of kind of added note chords in Monteverdi. That kind of thing, which, all of these added note chords that really do apply straight into the jazz world. And a lot of the things that he does with rhythm, the kind of freedom that he has with rhythm, is quite jazzy. So I see the connection. We've got, when you're working with Monteverdi, it's like working with a jazz score. You basically just have, well, here a bass line, but it implies chords. So it's like working with chord symbols. And I've got a guitar, and we're improvising. So it's very like making jazz. It's a very similar idiom. So, I mean, it's obviously, I'm playing a harpsichord, and you don't see those too much on the jazz circuit. So you are working with 350 years difference, but there are great similarities, and it's fascinating to see just how similar, despite all of that evolution, they are. In what it does with rhythm, and real simplicity of harmony, but what it does purely with rhythm, and how far it pushes the musical notation of the time. I mean, he didn't have accelerando, and he didn't have diminuendo, and he didn't have pizzicato as terms, so he had to make them up. He actually says, here the string players put down their bows, and they thwack the strings with 2 fingers. So a 2-fingered pizzicato coming here. And then he has to notate a diminuendo with a forte and then a piano, and tie the notes and say, but just play it with 1 bow. And instead of writing a cellorando, he has to write smaller and smaller rhythmical values and just hope that you'll imply that it just gets faster rather than just being strict rhythm. So it's an amazing musical document, and it tends to leave audiences breathless. This story of this battle between a man and what's actually a woman, but they don't He doesn't know it's a woman and doesn't know it's his lover until he's basically killed her. Then as she's lying mortally wounded in the Crusades, he lifts her visor and discovers that it's his lover Clorinda. It's incredibly moving. And using a slight reduction of the Bernstein, so it's just for wind instruments, we don't have strings, and we're using the great contemporary ensemble in town, Third Angle. Now, I've not worked with Third Angle before, but their work around town in Portland is wonderful and very highly regarded. So I'm sure these musicians will be fantastic for this Leonard Bernstein. And then we have, because you don't need an awful lot of instrumentation, we have period instruments for the Monteverdi, but just a couple of violins, a lute, harpsichord, and cello. So it's all about, it's very intimate works. It's very intimate in the Monteverdi, and then a bit more kind of brassy and splashy in the Bernstein, which would be great. Well, you couldn't do these works. You couldn't do the Monteverdi works in the Keller. They're just way too intimate. The use of silence, and I mean, at many points you need the singers to audibly breathe, because they're describing people's dying breaths. And that audible breath is written into the score. So, I mean, you can't hear someone breathe, even if they're doing it pretty heavily in the Keller. But in the Newmark, you surely can. It's a 900-seat house, and perfect kind of European-sized house for this kind of work. I think it'll be, Stephen Brentflack, our tenor, is very skilled in this style, and you need an excellent stylistic expert for this kind of thing. His voice suits it like a glove, and he's such a fine musician. I think Combattimento will be a fascinating experience. And who doesn't love Leonard Bernstein? It's just close to all of our hearts. What a wonderful man. I wish I'd met him.